Hello, thank you for being with us today. I'm Grace, and we are today at www.sickchick2trailblazer.com. I'm very happy to be talking to Larry today, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and begin. Larry, can you tell us about yourself and your work, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Grace. My name is Larry Berkelhammer, and I recently retired from a behavioral medicine practice where I was working with people who had serious, chronic, debilitating medical conditions. And the biggest challenge for them was they wanted to improve quality of life. Many of them were already doing everything right. I mean, they were already eating a really good, nutrient-dense diet. They were already doing whatever they could to get exercise every day. They were already managing sleep and stress, and they wanted to know what more they could do. So I worked with them to help them develop certain habits that could optimize their quality of life, their health, and well-being.
Wow, that's brilliant, and it's so important because I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel like when the situation is chronic illness, there can be sometimes people start blaming the person who has the illness because you haven't got better yet. So they start to say, well, have you drunk enough water, and perhaps you should go for a walk every day, and perhaps you should do this, and have you possibly tried doing that, and I heard about this thing in the newspaper, and if you eat it, you'll be better. And it kind of goes on and on and on. It can be very tempting at the start, at least, to go after all these different things because you think, well, maybe the next one will make me better. And actually, I think so often it's not that people are stupid and so they do bad things and they get ill. It's not that simple. Often we are doing everything we should be doing, or often we want to do things that we know we need to do and we struggle to, as all humans can. So can you tell us a little bit more about these optimum habits that you taught and that you teach?
Yeah. So, I used to be very traditional, and I used to think that doctors had all the answers, and I used to think that if you just go to your doctor, you'll be fine. But I was, when I was in my early 50s, and I'm 65 now, I was diagnosed with a number of potentially serious chronic illnesses, and I immediately found out there were no cures for anything I had. There were treatments, but the treatment for example, the treatment for my 3 autoimmune diseases would have interfered with 2 of my other diseases, so I couldn't even take any of the standard treatments. So I began to do some serious research, and I discovered that good medical care is, for those of us with chronic illness, good medical care is essential, but it's not enough. It's never enough. If you have acute illness, like, for example, a bacterial illness, you get an antibiotic. If you have a heart attack, there are great treatments now for heart attack, even stroke. But if you have a chronic illness, medicine has things to offer, but people who rely on their doctors, they are definitely not getting enough. So the first thing I decided to teach people is to become the team leader of your healthcare team. If you have a problem, let's say you're a homeowner, you have a house, and your roof is leaking, or you have a plumbing problem or an electrical problem, you call in someone to repair it. And how do you know who to call? Well, you do some research. You ask people, who's the best? If you're buying a product, you might go on Amazon and read the reviews, and you figure out what's the best one. But most people don't do that with the medical care. They just go to their doctor, and they trust their doctor. And so what I tell people is, treat your medical care team the way you would treat the people who repair your house or your car. You have to be the boss. You hire the best experts you can find, but you have to do your research and figure out who's going to be the best to help you. And if you're working with a doctor who isn't helping you, you need to take charge and find someone else. And so one of the things I tell everyone is, if you have not been getting well and you've been under the care of doctors, go to the largest academic medical center. I only know the ones in the United States. I'm in California. For example, in the United States, that would be centers like Massachusetts General, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. There are many, Cleveland Clinic. There are probably about 100 top-rated academic medical centers around the United States. And there are similar institutions throughout Europe and Asia. And it's very important to go to one of these places. These are teaching hospitals, because that's where the top doctors are, and those doctors have seen whatever you have, they've probably seen it before. So that's the first thing that I teach people. And then I have a whole bunch of other things that I teach them as well, having to do with just managing their own care and developing certain habits of health and well-being.
Well, that alone, the first thing you teach, it's so important. That can just change lives. And it's something that is often so unexamined in us. It's automatic to go to your doctor and, trust me, I'm a doctor. And, they're very wonderful people and they're there to help us. But if a situation for me, one of the illnesses I'm living with, we went to go see somebody about it, one of the doctors, and they were trying to prescribe some drugs that I wasn't so sure about. And in the end, I just said, listen, the man has met me for 5 minutes. He does not know me well enough, and he does not know enough about me and I don't think he'd seen many people with the illnesses I had. I said, I don't trust him to prescribe pills that are going to alter the chemicals and hormones in my body. I don't think he's in the right to do that. I spend more time with the people who do my pedicures than I do with that doctor. It's not happening.
It's really difficult. I mean, doctors don't have a lot of time to spend with us, and so they're doing the best they can do. I have great respect for doctors,
we do not go in for doctor bashing here. It's the medical system is often very overworked, very underpaid, very understaffed, and they're doing the best they can in what is an incredibly broken system around health and illness and well-being throughout the world. I mean, in general, we're not doing terribly well with it.
Yeah, it's funny. So here in the United States, we all talk about our broken system, but I've done some research and I've discovered that people in Canada are complaining about their broken system. People in the UK, people in France, people everywhere are complaining about the broken system. So everyone's doing the best they can, but the problem is we need a different model. And right now we don't have a better model. Maybe 50 years from now we will, but right now we all need to learn how to make the best of what we have.
Exactly.
And
actually, it's cool.
The way we make the best of what we have is we have to be, I have this expression, knowledge is power. The more knowledgeable we can become on how the healthcare system works, and the more knowledgeable we can become on our specific diagnoses, then the better we will do. You have to learn everything, you have to become an expert on your diagnosis. Yeah. So, for example, I have osteoporosis, but when I started researching it, I discovered most of what's known about osteoporosis relates to postmenopausal women. Well, I've had a man who's probably had osteoporosis most of my life. There's very, very little research on this. So I have to become an expert on the little that's known about it. And I have to find, and I've done this, I've had to find medical experts, physicians, who are metabolic bone specialists who know all about osteoporosis in men. And it takes time, it takes energy, but we have to do that because otherwise we're just not going to get the kind of care that we need to be healthy.
Exactly. And it's very different because hormones play such a great role in our bone density and in laying down of new bone. So in postmenopausal women, it's so different to how it is in a man.
Yeah. And what I discovered is my very, very severe osteoporosis is probably secondary, that is caused by a lifelong severe malabsorption syndrome. So I've never been absorbing all the nutrients. So I've worked with gastroenterologists, but the gastroenterologists aren't really that, they really don't know anything. I've been to top gastroenterologists at two of the top academic medical systems in the U.S., and they really can't help me because what I have is so unusual. So that led me to realize, okay, medicine doesn't have the answers. So what can I do? And I discovered that the single most important thing I can do, aside from diet, exercise, stress management, sleep, the usual things, the most important thing I can do is learn how to use my mind in ways that can improve my health. Because every thought we have, you cannot have a single thought that doesn't have some physiological correlates. It's amazing when you realize this, that thoughts are actually biochemical, electrochemical events in the brain that then affect physiological, biochemical, electrochemical events in the rest of the body. So when we engage in negative thinking, when we start, when we feel any uncomfortable emotions, for example, when we feel rage creates certain physiologic processes that predispose us to heart disease, stroke, cardiovascular disease, and other diseases. When we experience depression, long-term chronic depression, or long-term chronic anxiety, that affects our health. So we need to learn how to become masters of the mind so that we can, because that's something we can do for ourselves. We don't need to rely on the medical profession for that. In fact, they don't know about that stuff anyway. This is something we need to learn about for ourselves.
And that's definitely one thing that, as you say, we can do in this broken system. But if the system is broken, then what we can all do is take responsibility for our bodies, for doing the research, for our thoughts and our minds. And in our own little way, in our own lives, we are creating a new system just by living this.
Right. Yeah.
What I want to ask you, if you could change one thing in the world, what would that thing be?
If I could change one thing in the world?
Yeah. It could be in terms of health and wellness, or you could, really, really like pandas and want them to be everywhere. I don't mind. But one thing in the world, what would you change?
Well, probably if I could change one thing in the world, I would make everyone in the world loving and caring, so that they would love and care themselves and love and care for everyone else in the world.
Oh, that's very beautiful. It's very good to make. And
I think we've had spiritual leaders throughout history who've wanted that, but unfortunately those spiritual leaders always seem to get murdered.
Yes. When you look back at it, that does happen. And what we can draw from that, I don't know. But one other thing to ask, because I'm keeping this wonderful interview at a time which making sure it's accessible to people, because not everybody's got the energy to listen to us for ages, as much as I'd love to keep on talking to you. But two things before you go. The first question is, while you're on the line, is there a myth you'd like to dispel around your work or around some of the views on wellness and health we have?
Well, I think my biggest message is that everything we do throughout the day, all our behavior, all our thoughts affect our health. So what I advocate is learning how to practice mindfulness, become mindful so that we can become mindful, become aware of how we live our lives. Most of us go through life on autopilot. In other words, we do the same things every day. We think the same thoughts. We engage in the same behaviors every day, and we're not aware of what we're doing. And we need to become aware of all our behavior, because once we become aware of our behavior and of our thoughts, we then have the power, we then have the potential to make healthy changes. So, for example, eating is something we all do every day. If we're not conscious of our eating, if we're engaged in conversation while we're eating, or if we're watching TV while we're eating, or we're communicating in social media while we're eating, then we're not paying attention to how much we're eating. We're not paying attention to the quality of the food we're eating. We're not paying attention to how well we're chewing our food. We're not paying attention to our state of mind while we're eating. Are we relaxed or anxious while we're eating? This is very important because this affects how well we metabolize and absorb the nutrients from those foods. And so eating is just one of the things. Sleep. People have trouble getting enough sleep. So I ask people, what are you doing at night? Are you watching a suspense movie just before you go to bed? Are you reading an exciting book before you go to bed? Exciting, suspenseful books and movies are wonderful, but it's just common sense. Don't do that if you're going to be wanting to fall asleep right afterwards.
Yeah.
Exercise. How much exercise are you getting? I've worked for years with people with chronic illness who tell me, oh, I can't exercise. I've worked with quadriplegics who get lots of exercise. Not quadriplegics, paraplegics. If you're a quadriplegic, that's different. Those people cannot exercise, but everyone else, there's no excuse. I've worked with people with very debilitating chronic fatigue, and I've helped them to exercise. They don't go out and run marathons, but they have to be finding a way to get exercise. I've worked with people with debilitating, in fact, I have pretty severe arthritis. But so I can't do a lot of the things that other people can do. But it's essential for everyone, unless you're quadriplegic, it's essential to find a way to get a good amount of exercise every day. So there are lots of things like this that I advocate doing.
And if, say, you are quadriplegic, in some instances, if people are too ill or struggling to move, there's visualization and passive exercise.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Sorry.
Visualization.
Yes, visualization or passive exercise where your limbs are moved for you.
Well, absolutely, yes, and that is done for quadriplegics. And, in fact, interestingly, people like Christopher Reeve and many others who, in his case, he was injured by a terrible accident, but regardless of the cause. They have found that by using the imagination, by imagining moving their limbs, they're actually sending electrical signals to the limbs, and they're able, to a certain extent, to regenerate nerve conduction. Now, if the nerve is completely severed, that's a different thing. But using the imagination, using imagery, mental imagery, is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful way of improving health, regardless of what's wrong with us.
So if people want to get in touch with you and find out more about your work and work with you, how should they contact you?
So I'm now retired, so I no longer work with people, but I do have a website. I spend all my time now managing a nonprofit, non-commercial, public service website. And my website is there to provide information, and I post comments to my blog on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And my website is just filled with enormous volumes of information for people living with chronic illness. And it's LarryBerkelhammer.com.
And can you spell that for us?
It's LarryBerkelhammer.com. LarryBerkelhammer.com.
That's wonderful. I'm sure we will all be heading there. Thank
And
you
I don't sell anything on the website. It's purely a public service.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today, Larry. I'm really, really excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me, Grace.
It's a pleasure. And thank you, Trailblazers, for listening. I look forward to speaking to you further about implementing Larry's ideas into your lives. And remember, anything else you want to ask or see on the blog, just head over and contact me via www.sixchickstrailblazer.com. Thank you. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.